Hello and welcome to Wasted Culture. I'm Liam.
I'm Sam. I'm Kiva.
And we are recording here today from the Comedy Cave in the lovely nation of Maryland and its 49 lesser compatriots.
So today we'll be talking about War of the Worlds.
Not the first sci-fi, but it is the first image on Wikipedia's page for science fiction.
So what does that tell you?
I think it says a lot. I mean, there are definitely a lot of science fiction stories that came before it, going all the way back to the 2nd century. A true story by Lucian of Samosata is the earliest known work to include travel to outer space, alien life forms, and interplanetary warfare. In addition, Sonium by Johannes Klepner and Arabian Nights, Gulliver's Travels, Frankenstein. Those are all science fiction that predates War of the Worlds, and alien science fiction, some of them that predates War of the Worlds. But none of those even have a picture image on the Wikipedia page for science fiction, so they can all bend over and eat their own asses while we kneel at the good lordy, at the altar of the mighty H.G. Wells.
I knew you'd fuck that.
I always fuck everything up. That's like, you don't win any money for guessing that Liam's gonna fuck something up.
That is objectively untrue.
So a brief summary of the War of the Worlds for those who have managed to never encounter it. Aliens land on Earth, depending on the version of the story, either in the United Kingdom or in New Jersey, one of those being an, obviously better choice than the other.
That's true. New Jersey is the biggest hellhole possibly ever.
And then they add Martians to it.
Yeah.
The UK is not great either, let's be honest.
I mean, maybe not, but Woking is pretty nice.
That may be true. I can't think of a single part of New Jersey that's nice.
I mean, the Pine Barrens.
Liam, you're aware that the word is waking, not woking.
Woking is a town in Great Britain.
I know.
Everyone there is very woke.
I figured they just drink a lot of coffee.
I am so waking right now.
That or they're just like the UK's #1 consumer of amphetamines.
I thought the UK's #1 consumer of amphetamines was Theresa May.
Quite possibly.
Should we introduce the dog barking in the background?
We could. I just don't know what his name is or if we can hear him on the microphone.
His name is Stephen von Friedrich von Wrinkelsnuff.
Sure. Anyway, so War of the Worlds. Aliens descend upon the Earth, mass havoc, mass destruction, heat rays, people go poof, they fart out a bunch of black smoke all over the place, bring out invasive plants that grow everywhere. And in case you haven't been able to figure out, the book at least is kind of a criticism of the British Empire.
CBS War of the Worlds is radio broadcasted by Orson Welles, who was funded indirectly by the Rockefeller Foundation through the Princeton Radio Project and guided at every stage by the CFR, which is the Council on Foreign Relations, and psychologist Dr. Paul F. Lazarsfield. Frank Stanton, who later became head of CBS Radio and Television, and Dr. Hadley Cantrell hired Orson Welles to adapt the story of H.G. Wells, who happens to have been also a 33rd degree Freemason, classic science fiction book into a radio drama format in order to study the behavior of citizens. Orson Welles...
Okay, Sammy. What the hell are you talking about, and why the hell are you talking about it?
So interestingly enough, there is actually a pretty solid, and by solid I mean somebody solidly believes this, a conspiracy theory that War of the Worlds was broadcasted by Orson Welles as a larger conspiracy for psychologists in the 1930s to study how the American people would react to an alien invasion. This theory has no bearing, and the doctors referenced in it are completely unrelated to any of the staffing at CBS and have no relation whatsoever to anything about the program itself. But if you want to learn more about it, you can try Nexus Illuminati which is a
Okay.
great blog website for Illuminati conspiracy theory only.
Okay, so I was going to ask, when we say solid, are we talking Reddit solid? Are we talking like WordPress blog solid? Or are we talking like Wayback Machine 90 GeoCities sites? But I think you've already answered that.
It is about as solid of a belief as dash.
You brought up, actually, the Orson Welles Mercury Theater of the Air adaptation of War of the Worlds from 1938.
Yeah.
It's a great, great piece of fiction. If you've never listened to it before, it's available on YouTube. I highly recommend looking it up and giving it a listen. It's very, very well done. And, of course, part of its essential mythology is that when it was broadcast, a lot of people missed the introduction where it was announced that it was a fictional piece done by Orson Welles' Mercury Theater of the Air, which I believe was pretty well known, was pretty popular at the time. And because the radio piece is presented as a news broadcast coming out of Grover's Mill, New Jersey, a lot of people supposedly took it seriously and believed that Grover's Mill, New Jersey was being overrun by killer aliens. I have heard that hysteria is a little bit overblown, though.
So the hysteria is definitely overblown. It's a commonly held belief when talking about that people heard it, ran home, screaming in the streets, got right to their radios at home, and immediately started cowering for the alien-based end of the world in 1938. Because of this, we find out not only was it not true, we can't find any sources that really reveal there was a mass amount of hysteria about it, with the exception of some New Jerseyans, because as was previously stated, New Jersey is a horrible, decrepit place, and frankly, I'm embarrassed that it's part of the United States.
You know what? Hold on a second. Hold that thought. We are podcasting professionals, and that barking dog is annoying the shit out of me. I'm closing the door.
I feel like New Jerseyans would actually be somewhat relieved to have New Jersey be destroyed by space aliens.
I don't know about that. They're weirdly proud of it.
Yeah, New Jerseyans are the only people who are proud of New Jersey.
Oh.
So, if you look at news sources such as the New York Daily News, you'll have things pop up like mass hysteria caused people in 1938 in Manhattan to flood out in the middle of the day or early evening and run home freaking out with just a mass hysteria erupted.
But if you look at actual news sources...
Right. If you break down the logistics of this, it really doesn't make sense. I took the liberty of running over a few of just the basic logistics.
Oh, good. Nerdy McMathy Pants is going to give us some nice, fun math to crunch on.
Warning, the hosts of this podcast are not that smart, nor are they terribly mathy. They are, however, wearing pants.
In 1938, the population of New York was roughly about 7,200,000 people. I just did that by the 1940 population of New York City was about 7,500,000 people, give or take.
7 million too many in any event, so let's...
Yeah, 7 million. Increases about 1 million per decade. So 1938, about 7,200,000. At the time, people were averaging about $956 per year.
Okay.
That was their annual income.
What does that have to do with the...
So, it was about $40 to buy a radio.
Okay.
In a place where renowned for people to not be able to afford anything. I mean, this is the time of, the end stretch of tenement housing, large immigration populations. $40 then would roughly be about $1,260 today. So that just throws the whole possibility that most people had a radio.
Well, it's New York City, so they probably all stole one.
Is this podcast just going to be 99% shitting on states that aren't Maryland?
Yes.
Probably, yeah. I mean, in fairness...
I declare war on any state that's not Maryland.
In fairness, if they didn't want to be shit on so much, they should stop not being Maryland.
Yes.
Just import crap everywhere. Speaking of Arkansas, it should be Arkansas. Everyone should be with me on this. Who the fuck do they think they are?
Seriously. At the time, there were about 1,000 phone calls, really asking the police and the authorities in general if this was really happening. 1,000 phone calls in a city of 7 million really isn't that much. So you always have some crazy hanger-ons, and frankly, they were probably from New Jersey.
But that's just New York, though. What about the rest of the country? What about the Midwest? What about Maryland?
Maryland, like all things, was very concerned at the time about getting ready for the inevitable war with Delaware, where we usurped 3 counties. If you don't know about it, it's a plan that's still in progress. But, it really seemed unlikely. There was a disclaimer at the beginning that everything coming was a fictional broadcast, which some people surely did miss.
I'll openly acknowledge I'm a huge nerd, as you can probably guess by the fact that I'm recording a podcast about War of the Worlds. I've listened to the Orson Welles Mercury Theater on the air literally a dozen times or so at this point. There are tells that it's a fictional story all throughout the program, and like I said earlier, the Mercury Theater on the Air was fairly popular at the time, I believe. So I think people probably recognize it. What's up, Kiva?
Tells like the space aliens, you mean?
Well, yeah, those two. But this is kind of all presuming that people would believe in the space aliens in the first place.
Okay, that's fair.
Anyone who doesn't believe in space aliens is a Democrat.
Shut up.
But I gotta be honest, there is some extent to which I can believe, or at least when I was a kid, I found it really easy to believe that people would get that freaked out by the War of the Worlds, because I saw the movie version from the 60s, 50s, 60s, when I was 10, 11 years old, and I was absolutely terrified.
But aren't you then implying that most Americans have the intelligence and base perception of a 10 to 12-year-old?
I didn't say that. We rented it to watch from... God, do you remember renting movies from video stores to watch?
Do I remember renting movies? Do you remember renting video games?
Let's not date ourselves. Anyway.
We're in our mid-20s. We're in our early 20s.
That's the joke. Anyway, but we rented it. We went downstairs to watch it. It was myself, Kiva, who is my sister, for those of you who haven't picked it up or aren't already aware.
Not my sister. Hashtag not my sister.
Don't you insult my sister like that. Anyway, we came home and rented, and I think that I got around to the point where the army first shows up to fail to do anything, and I was gone. I was fucking gone. Kiva can testify to this.
You were scared.
I was
like a baby.
I was pretty goddamn scared. But you know what I have to say to you, Kiva, in response?
What?
Beware of the blobby creeps and leaps and slides and glides across the floor right through
That was
the
a terrifying film, and I don't appreciate you mocking this horrifying nightmare fuel.
Incidentally, many years after that, a few years after that, when the Steven Spielberg version of War of the Worlds came out in theaters, me and my father went to go see it, and I think I got about to the point where the first person got hit with a laser beam, and I went to go rewatch the rest of Madagascar or something in a different theater. I've rewatched it though. It's a good movie. It's okay.
Madagascar is?
Well, that too.
I like the lemurs.
Yeah, the lemurs were great. I like how they just took a whole bunch of the worst music from the 70s and 80s and just made a soundtrack out of it.
Yeah, totally. I mean...
I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I'm going to stab you both.
For all you listeners out there, now that we've reached Liam's second song of the episode, you'll get a free prize if you can name the third song he sings. The free prize, of course, will be your pride and nothing actually of monetary value.
Hey, don't you mean they would lose their pride?
We've all lost our pride, Liam.
I mean, we did. We started recording a podcast.
That's true. If you also like old radio broadcasts...
Like, comment, and subscribe.
Is this getting put up on YouTube?
Maybe.
Oh, no.
We need to cut keep asking that.
Hi!
Oh, God. They can't know we know about YouTube. YouTube doesn't exist.
Static cut now! War of the Worlds occupies such a seminal place in American pop culture that it's often just kind of reused to the point of almost unrecognizability.
Yeah, I mean, the tropes that it has are seemingly what you expect an alien sci-fi to be. I mean, the idea of a Mars invasion as just a plot,
Well, that's
an
'cause-
invasion by Martian aliens as a plot is, that's old hat for us now.
Well, yeah, I mean, it establishes the tropes of kind of modern science fiction literature, particularly when it comes to aliens and alien invasions. I mean, you've got the two movies based on it. Martians, Mars is kind of our go-to for, hostile alien forces now.
That's true, even though we currently have, the Mars rover, which we have picking up rocks, which have yet to be shown to be hostile.
Yeah, I think at this point we're pretty well clear on how fucking dead Mars actually is.
Really just the rest of our solar system. However, there are new planets being discovered pretty much every 2 or 3 weeks or so.
Well,
There's a lot of planets out there.
there's
at least 7.
I mean, we could have a whole other podcast, and probably will have a whole other podcast about whether or not aliens exist. There's a mathematical probability that, in an infinitely expanding universe, there has to be other intelligent life forms. And there's also the Fermi paradox, which is, if there are all these other fucking life forms, where are they? So anyway, moving on.
The answer is yes. Aliens exist.
So, that's our year, but why don't we put it back into the context of the time? I mean, the 19th century, the late 19th century, was when this book was written by H.G. Wells, where he was basically crapping out great works of science fiction with The Time Machine and Oliver Twist, and
I don't think he wrote.
he wrote Wuthering Heights, and he wrote Pride and Prejudice.
Literature is not really our strong point. We're a historian and a tech nerd.
Constitution. I mean, he wrote the Bible.
I think that the Bible would be a lot more readable if H.G. Wells had written it.
That would be amazing.
Frankly,
and God said, tentacled aliens.
And it would frankly be a better source of moral guidance.
What was Orson Welles, by broadcasting this on his show, what was he trying to do?
Well, he was adapting a well-known story. War of the Worlds became a popular story basically as soon as it was published. Within weeks, really, of its original publication, there were, unofficial adaptations like Fighters from Mars, published by Cosmo, of all people.
That's why I only read Big Truck and also Some Tires magazine.
It's all about boobs, right?
No,
it's a euphemism for big trucks, boobs.
Is that a euphemism for boobs?
I mean, you're the one who reads the magazine.
Who's
you tell
like
me.
big trucks are what I want to call breasts? Who thinks that way? So they have trucks, which are standing on 4 wheels. The trucks are breasts, but the wheels are also breasts?
Yeah, breast on breast on breast and breast. That's what men want.
Women. They just want a pile of breasts.
With a vag in there somewhere.
I don't even think they want a. They just want to fuck breasts.
It depends.
Not leave this.
Yeah, maybe not.
I don't read magazines because I'm not a fucking caveman. What is wrong with you?
Well, sometimes you just want to get your porn in an old-fashioned format.
Yeah, we don't read magazines.
I assure you, we do not read Playboy for the articles. I've only bought a Playboy once in my life, and it's a story it's a story I probably should not relate on a public podcast.
Buy indie porn, kids.
Do not.
Support the artist directly.
I'm cutting that.
No, we'll leave
that.
We'll leave that in. There's just going to be a section in the middle here that's just going to be us rambling about some shit.
I mean, really, this is kind of what I listen to podcasts for anyways.
So, yes, there were unofficial adaptations. There were unofficial sequels. The Fighters from Mars, published by Cosmo.
That was Liam's third song of the podcast.
So
What
if you
was
guess
the name of that song?
you guess just a bunch of unimaginable tuneless dribble, then get out of my fucking mind.
The answer was come. The answer was come away with me. Come sail away.
Bermuda, Bahama, come on, pretty mama. Chago, they go, baby, why don't we go down to Kokomo?
We can
Cut it all out.
Take it slow. Way down in Kokomo.
Alright, come back.
Fighters from Mars. Unauthorized, edited version of the War of the Worlds that was originally published by Cosmo magazine in 1897, about year and a half after the original War of the Worlds was published in Britain. First version, according to Wikipedia, appeared in the New York Evening Journal between December 5th, 1897 and January 11th, 1898, and was entitled Fighters from Mars, or The War of the Worlds. The second version appeared in the Boston Post between January 8, 1898 and February 1898 and was entitled Fighters from Mars, or The War of the Worlds in and near Boston. These versions changed the settings to the local areas where the newspapers were on sale, and also edited out most of the passages containing scientific details pertaining to ordinary people, and problematic actions by the narrator.
Which really makes sense. I mean, the people don't want to hear science.
I mean,
They don't believe it anyway.
it's continuing the fine American tradition of dumbing down media for an American audience.
Hot diggity dang.
Hot takes right here, folks. Nothing but the hottest takes from Wasted Culture. And that is kind of an interesting story, but I gotta be honest, I bring it up only so I can bring up its, frankly, far more interesting sounding sequel, Edison's Conquest of Mars.
This one, however, is not an Illuminati conspiracy. This is actually a real work of literature.
Yeah, this happened sometime around the time that he created his device to channel Vril energy before Nikola Tesla and his atomic-powered robot came and destroyed it before its, tectonic shaverings destroyed New York City.
You know what, Liam? I don't believe you that you're thinking about Tesla's atomic powered robo. I don't think that really happened.
Gee, you think?
I'm just gonna go out there and say it. I think you're telling a fib.
Yeah. That's Atomic Robo for those of you who aren't comic book fans. I highly recommend looking it up. It's pretty fucking great.
There's an RPG based on it.
It's also got Atomic Robo and Carl Sagan teaming up to destroy Lovecraftian creatures from outside of time and space.
You know, this is actually real. Carl Sagan, huge pothead.
Huge pothead. I figured we'd save that until the speculation on Aliens podcast, but fuck it. Yeah, Carl Sagan. Dude loved him some pot. I think he was a pretty big fan of acid, too, actually.
Yeah. Just to be clear, they don't mean that he was a huge fan of pot. They mean he was a huge fan of pot. He was actually 16 feet tall.
That's why he wore those turtlenecks, you see. They made him look smaller.
That's true. Little known fact about Carl Sagan.
He hid his extra height in the neck portion.
Carl Sagan, known for pioneering research in a genetic disease called giraffocytosis.
Also for turtlenecks.
Why is it called a turtleneck if it's... Like, do turtles just have a scrunch on their neck? I've never seen a turtle like that.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. You don't
That's
spend
how
much
they,
time
like,
looking at
pull their
turtles,
head
do
in.
you?
What if that came out of the spaceships instead of the tentacle monsters?
Yeah, but
People be as threatened.
Depends on what kind of turtle it looked like. Red-eared slider? Fucking adorable. Alligator snapping turtle? Absolutely fucking terrifying.
Your knowledge of different turtle species is extensive and surprising.
Well, there was like that teacher in somewhere in the nightmare states out west who was just convicted or was just arrested for feeding a puppy to a snapping turtle in front of his middle school students.
Now it's time for a special break for a game. Name 5 nightmare states in 5 seconds. Go!
Step.
So do we want to keep talking about Edison's Conquest of Mars, or do we just want to kind of roll right on?
You know, I actually, if we keep talking about Edison's Conquest of Mars, I'll start talking about John Carter of Mars.
So as we brought up earlier, wow, I'm probably going to have to edit a lot of this out.
Okay, I mean, we've been talking for like 45 minutes.
We're honing your skills to a razor edge.
Yeah, right. War of the Worlds, in its original published form, almost comes across as a very progressive book. There are many comparisons you can make, many parallels you can make to the behaviors of the Martians and a lot of the worst behaviors of mankind, some of which he actually brings up fairly directly early on in a line that actually does a really great job of undercutting any progressive stance that the book may have taken. I'll have that for you in just a moment. Sammy, if you'd please stall for some time for me.
Hey everybody, it's Zam. Alright, I gave you a few seconds.
Yeah, I need at least like 3 more.
War of the Worlds is really just a classic. If you haven't read it, you really should read it. At least take the time. It's not an easy book to get through, but any works of H.G. Wells really highly would recommend.
Okay, I found the passage we're looking for. So, trigger warning, this is racist as shit. This is a problem I have with a lot of these really otherwise great old science fiction stories, is that the authors were often just overtly fucking racist.
Yeah.
So
not like authors now who are
early on in the book, page 35 or so, we men, the creatures who inhabit this earth, must be to them at least as alien and lowly as are the monkeys and lemurs to us. The intellectual side of man already admits that life is an incessant struggle for existence, and it would seem this too is the belief of the minds upon Mars. So, with that line, he kind of establishes, one, that the Martians and the humans, they have very similar views as we do to humans, but it also tries to reverse that a little bit. It makes us look at ourselves as the lemurs and the monkeys, animals that we test drugs and fancy perfumes on the eyeballs upon, because apparently you smell with your eyeballs.
I mean, to be fair, do you not smell with your eyeballs?
Not last time I checked. Their world is far gone in its cooling, so kind of the opposite problem we're going for. And this world is still crowded with life, but crowded only with what they regard as inferior animals. To carry warfare sunward is, indeed, their only escape from the destruction that, generation after generation, creeps upon them. And here's the fun part. And before we judge of them too harshly, we must remember what ruthless and utter destruction our own species hath wrought, not only upon animals, such as the vanquished bison and dodo. I'm pretty sure bison still exist, but...
Bison do still exist.
Yeah, the dodos don't.
No. They went the way of the dodo.
Yeah, apparently they were too tasty. Remember, kids, tastiness is not a good evolutionary trait. Select against it.
That's true. That's why dogs don't taste very good.
Not only upon animals such as the vanished bison and the dodo, but upon its inferior races. The Tasmanians, in spite of their human likeness, were entirely swept out of existence in a war of extermination waged by European immigrants in the space of 50 years. Are we such apostles of mercy as to complain if the Martians were in the same spirit?
Which is interesting that he's attempting to be like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do racial extermination, but at the same time being like, hey, these people really are inferior, though.
Yeah, right? They're not even really human. They're just human-like. God, yeah, I mean, British people, basically. Certainly.
White people.
Well, yeah, but British people are the whitest of white people. Also, when you get right down to it, most of these, white people stereotypes are based around Anglo people, and by extension, Americans, because American culture is so heavily based off of Anglo culture.
Absolutely.
In any event, for example, the Irish just wanted to mind their own goddamn business.
And, murder travelers.
And be Catholic sometimes.
Well,
sometimes.
Actually, they wanted everybody to be Catholic.
Most of the time.
Anyway, more topics that people want to shoot us for. I think a lot of people either just don't realize, don't think, or completely forget about the fact that there was an entire, ethnic group on Tasmania that was completely wiped out by the European settlers. And, like he said, within the space of 50 years. It's...
I'll see that and raise you the Arawak peoples of the Caribbean, who were wiped out in less than 50 years.
How long were they wiped out in?
Roughly about 10 to 15 years.
It's actually not a race to genocide. We're not awarding prizes for it.
Race to Genocide. Worst Michael Bay film you ever saw.
Also not that far off from the worst tabletop game of all time.
Don't say it.
I'm not. You can look it up on your own time, folks.
Just Google worst tabletop game of all time.
You're going to get 2 options. It'll be pretty obvious which one I'm talking about based on context. Don't play either of them. Don't even joke about playing either of them.
No one will like you.
No one likes you now because you're thinking about it.
I mean, nobody likes me because I keep joking about it every time we talk about running a game night.
Yep. That's correct.
Well, not the really awful one.
What kind of crap is that? Do you think this is a game?
Yes. Well, not this exactly, but like our game nights are a game.
How can games be real if our eyes aren't real?
And with that, this has been Wasted Culture. Thank you all, folks, so much for joining us. We'll be back again soon to discuss something else alien-related, or at least we'll talk about it a little bit in between nonsense. I think this is probably a pretty good time to wrap it up.
I just want to say, in the original movie that was released at the time period, I don't remember.
Do you have more to talk about? Because we can keep going.
The aliens had the Simon Says light circle with quadrants for the face, and I thought that was really cute. That's all I want to say. They're Simon Says aliens.
Like, comment, or subscribe to Wasted Culture.
Thanks
They're
for joining.
so cute.
Thanks for joining us, folks. Have a good one. We don't want to hear about your tentacle porn hentai fantasies, Kiva.
So let's put it into its context.
Must not be named.